Welcome back, everyone, and if you're new here, I'm so glad you found the channel. We're on an exciting journey to reach 10k subscribers by next year, and every like, comment and subscription brings us one step closer. Your support means everything. Now, let's jump into today's video. The static crackles through the ancient speakers, echoing off the steel-reinforced walls of humanity's last fortress. My hands shake as I adjust the frequency dial, knowing these could be my final moments. I am Dr. Elias Vorkov, and at 108 years old, I've lived far longer than any human should. The price of this longevity weighs heavily upon me, each breath a reminder of what we sacrificed in our pursuit of protection. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the control panel before me. Even now I can hear it coming, the sound of reality itself being torn apart like fabric ripping on a cosmic scale. The noise grows louder with each passing second, and the very air around me feels wrong, as if the basic laws of nature are beginning to unravel. Through the reinforced window of my chamber, I can see the corridors of the vault stretching into darkness. The facility that has been my home for nearly a century now lies in ruins. Warning sirens blare in the distance, their sound distorted by the growing anomalies that plague our last bastion. The few remaining emergency lights flicker erratically, creating shadows that move in ways shadows should not. I must tell you everything before it's too late. The world needs to know what we found, what we did, and why the end is now inevitable. My voice may be weak, my body may be failing, but my mind remains sharp enough to recall that fateful day in 1940 when humanity's path toward extinction began. The Arctic expedition was supposed to be routine, a geological survey funded by a consortium of international research institutions. I was young then, barely 30 years old, filled with ambition and the naive belief that science could explain everything. We had no way of knowing that what we would discover beneath the ice would defy all explanation. The day of discovery remains etched in my memory with perfect clarity. The temperature had dropped well below zero, and the wind howled across the frozen landscape like a living thing. Our instruments had detected an anomalous energy signature deep beneath the ice, something unlike anything we'd ever encountered. As we drilled deeper, the equipment began to malfunction in strange ways. Compass needles spun wildly, radio communications became filled with bizarre interference, and every member of the team reported feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. When we finally broke through to the cavern below, we found it, the shard, a massive black crystal that seemed to absorb all light that touched it. It sat in a perfectly spherical chamber of ice, as if the very glacier had grown around it with deliberate purpose. The moment we laid eyes upon it, we knew we had found something that would change everything. If only we had known then to destroy it, to bury it deeper, to walk away and never return. But we were scientists driven by curiosity and the pursuit of knowledge. How could we have known that our discovery would set in motion the end of everything? The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when Dr. Anders Thompson, our lead geologist, approached the crystal for a closer examination. As he drew near, the air around him began to distort, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. He reached out toward the surface of the shard, ignoring our warnings, transfixed by its otherworldly presence. The moment his fingers made contact, he simply ceased to exist. There was no sound, no flash of light, no dramatic effect. He was there one moment, and in the next, there was nothing but empty space where he had stood. 3 more members of our expedition vanished, in similar fashion over the next 48 hours. Those of us who remained began to experience vivid nightmares, dreams of vast, empty spaces between realities of ancient beings that existed beyond human comprehension. The shard had begun its work, planting seeds of knowledge in our minds that no mortal being was meant to possess. We knew we couldn't leave it there, couldn't risk others finding it. But we also knew we couldn't destroy it. Every attempt to damage the shard resulted in the complete molecular disintegration of whatever tool we used. Within days, a global coalition of scientists, government officials, and military leaders was formed. The decision was made to construct a facility unlike any other, a place where we could study and contain this threat to reality itself. That facility would become known as the Vault. The construction took years, with the most brilliant minds from around the world working together in absolute secrecy. We built it deep beneath the Earth's surface, using technologies that were decades ahead of their time. The Vault was designed to be a fortress, a prison, and a research facility all in one. Its walls were lined with experimental materials designed to contain the strange energies emanating from the shard. But even then, we were naive to think we could truly contain something that existed partially outside our own reality. I was selected to lead the research team, my expertise in theoretical physics, making me the ideal candidate. We established protocols, safety measures, and containment procedures. We thought we were prepared for anything. We were wrong, so terribly, catastrophically wrong. The first years of research seemed promising. We made breakthrough after breakthrough in our understanding of dimensional physics and the nature of reality itself. But with each discovery came a price. Researchers would go mad, their minds unable to cope with the knowledge they gained. Others would disappear, just as Dr. Thompson had, leaving behind nothing but empty rooms and half-finished notes. As I sit here now, watching the walls of the vault buckle under forces they were never designed to withstand, I can't help but wonder if we ever had a chance. Did the shard allow itself to be found? Were we always meant to bring it here, to study it, to try to understand it? Were we simply playing our part in some vast cosmic plan that we could never hope to comprehend? The noises are getting closer now. I can feel reality beginning to slip away around me. But I must continue. You need to understand what happened in those early years, how we tried to protect humanity, and how we ultimately failed. The story of the vault, of the shard, and of our doom must be told. The construction of the vault changed all of us. As the facility grew deeper into the earth, so did our understanding of what we faced. The initial structure was a marvel of engineering. 50 levels of reinforced chambers, research laboratories, and containment units, all centered around the primary containment chamber where the shard would be housed. But even as we built it, strange things began to happen. Workers would report seeing things in their peripheral vision, shadows that moved against the light. Others spoke of hearing whispers in empty corridors, voices that spoke in languages that had never existed on Earth. At first we dismissed these reports as stress, as the natural result of working in such an isolated environment. We were fools. I remember the day we moved the shard into its new home. The transport operation had been planned for months, with every possible contingency accounted for. We used a specially designed container, lined with experimental materials that we hoped would dampen its influence. As we lowered it into the primary containment chamber, every piece of electronic equipment within a mile radius failed simultaneously. The backup generators kicked in, but the readings they gave us were impossible. Energy signatures that defied the laws of physics, radiation patterns that shouldn't exist in our universe. That was the day I first began to notice the changes in myself. My hair had started greying years before, but now it was turning white at an accelerated rate. The wrinkles that had begun to form around my eyes deepened into crevices. Yet, despite my apparent aging, I felt stronger, more vital. My mind was sharper than ever, filled with insights and understanding that I couldn't explain. The shard was changing me, just as it was changing everyone who worked in the vault. The first major incident occurred 6 months after the shard's installation. Dr. Isabella Romano, one of our most brilliant researchers, had been conducting routine measurements of the energy field surrounding the artifact. She had done this hundreds of times before, but this time was different. According to the security footage, she stopped suddenly in the middle of her work, her head tilting as if listening to something none of us could hear. Then she smiled, a terrible, empty smile that haunts me to this day, and walked straight through the containment field. We found her 3 days later in a sealed room 5 levels below, writing on the walls in her own blood. The symbols she had drawn were unlike anything we had ever seen, yet they seemed to carry meaning, a weight that pressed against the mind when you looked at them too long. Before we could restrain her, she spoke her last words. "It shows us what we really are." The incident with Dr. Romano was just the beginning. Over the next few years, we lost more researchers, each in increasingly disturbing ways. Some simply vanished, while others were found in various states of physical or mental deterioration. Those who survived began to exhibit strange abilities, perfect recall, increased intelligence, insight into problems that should have been beyond human comprehension. But these gifts came at a terrible price. I established new protocols, limiting exposure to the shard, and implementing strict psychological evaluations for all personnel. But it was like trying to hold back the tide with a paper wall. The shard's influence continued to grow, seeping through every crack in our defenses, both physical and mental. In 1955, we discovered the first evidence that the shard was not unique. Reports began coming in from around the world, strange phenomena that matched the patterns we had observed in the vault. Black crystals, smaller but identical in composition to the shard, were being found in remote locations. Each discovery was followed by inexplicable events, massive storms that defied meteorological explanation, disappearances and distortions in the fabric of reality itself. The global coalition that had formed to contain the shard now faced a much larger threat. We established additional facilities, smaller versions of the vault, to contain these new discoveries. But with each new find, the pattern became clearer. These weren't random occurrences. The shard was spreading, reaching out across our world like roots growing from a poisonous tree. As I recorded these events in my personal logs, I began to notice discrepancies in the official reports. Small details would change between readings, dates would shift, and entire incidents would seem to rewrite themselves in our records. At first, I attributed these inconsistencies to stress and fatigue, but as the years passed, I realized something far more disturbing. The shard wasn't just affecting our reality, it was actively rewriting it. My wife Eleanor was one of the first to recognize the true scope of what was happening. As the Vault's chief archivist, she had access to all of our records, and she began noticing patterns that the rest of us had missed. The changes weren't random, they were purposeful, directed. The shard wasn't just an object of power, it was conscious, learning, adapting to our attempts to contain it. Eleanor's discovery cost her everything. One evening in 1962, she burst into my office clutching a stack of documents. Her hands were shaking, her eyes wild with a mixture of fear and revelation. "It's all connected, Elias," she said. "The disappearances, the changes in our memories, the way time seems to flow differently down here. It's not trying to break out, it's trying to pull us in." Before she could explain further, the lights throughout the vault began to flicker. The air grew thick, heavy with an electric charge that made my skin crawl. Eleanor grabbed my hand, her grip painfully tight. "Listen to me," she whispered. "There are others who know. They're not trying to stop it. They're helping it. You have to." The rest of her warning was lost in a sudden, deafening silence. The kind of silence that feels like a physical presence pressing against your eardrums. When my vision cleared, Eleanor was gone. Not taken, not disappeared. Gone in a way that suggested she had never existed at all. Only my memories of her remained, becoming hazier with each passing day, as if the shard was trying to erase even those. The loss of Eleanor changed something in me. I began to look at our work differently, to question everything we thought we knew about the shard. I spent years analysing every scrap of data, every incident report, every personal account from the researchers who had succumbed to its influence. A pattern emerged, but it was so horrifying that at first I refused to accept it. The shard wasn't just an artifact from another dimension. It was a seed, planted in our reality by something vast and incomprehensible. Each person it affected, each mind it touched, became part of its network. We weren't containing it, we were incubating it, helping it grow stronger with every attempt to understand it. By the 1970s, the changes had become impossible to ignore. The lower levels of the vault had become unstable. Areas where the laws of physics seemed to be more like suggestions than rules. Corridors would extend endlessly. Rooms would rearrange themselves, and time flowed differently depending on your proximity to the shard. We lost entire research teams in these spatial anomalies, their screams echoing through the facility for days after they disappeared. The global situation was deteriorating as well. The smaller fragments we had found around the world were growing, each one creating its own sphere of influence. Weather patterns became increasingly erratic, storms that rained upward, clouds that moved against the wind, auroras appearing in places they never should. People in cities near these fragments began reporting shared dreams, visions of vast, dark spaces filled with pinpricks of light that moved with purpose. But the most disturbing development was happening within the vault's own hierarchy. Members of the Oversight Committee began making decisions that seemed to actively facilitate the shard's growth. Security protocols were relaxed, research restrictions were lifted, and more personnel were allowed prolonged exposure to the artifact. When I raised concerns, I was quietly removed from key projects, my security clearance restricted. In 1985, I discovered the truth. Late one night, while reviewing security footage, I noticed a pattern of unauthorized access to the lower levels. Following this lead, I found a hidden chamber that shouldn't have existed, a space that had been carved out of the very bedrock beneath the vault's lowest level. What I found there shattered any remaining illusions about our mission. The walls were covered in the same symbols Dr. Romano had drawn in her blood decades earlier, but these were carved with precision, purpose. Banks of advanced equipment hummed with power, all of it oriented around a central platform that bore a disturbing resemblance to an altar. And there, scattered across various workstations, were the documents that revealed everything. Project Rebirth. The project wasn't aimed at containing the shard, or preventing its influence from spreading. Instead, it was designed to accelerate the process, to actively help the shard reshape our reality. The most horrifying part: the signatures on these documents belonged to people I had trusted, people I had worked alongside for decades. They believed that humanity's only chance for survival was to embrace the shard's transformation, to willingly submit to whatever change it was trying to enact. I couldn't allow Project Rebirth to continue, but acting against it proved nearly impossible. Those who had embraced the shard's influence had been gifted with abilities that defied explanation. They could sense deception, could see through walls, could manipulate the minds of others with just a touch. My only advantage was that they didn't know I had discovered their secret. For years, I worked in silence, gathering evidence, making copies of crucial documents, and searching for others who might have remained untouched by the shard's corruption. It was slow, dangerous work. Each day, I had to maintain the facade of the dedicated researcher while secretly working to undermine everything the vault had become. The world above was changing more rapidly now. The smaller fragments of the shard had grown into crystalline structures that towered hundreds of feet into the sky. Cities had to be evacuated, as reality itself began to warp around these growth sites. The public was told these were natural disasters, the results of climate change or geological instability, but those of us who knew the truth could see the pattern. The Shard was creating anchor points, preparing our world for something unprecedented. In 1995, I made contact with a group of researchers from other facilities who had also discovered the truth about Project Rebirth. Dr. Peter Blackwood from the Pacific facility had documented similar corruption in his organization. Dr. Amelia Voss from the European containment site had proof that their leadership was deliberately sabotaging containment measures. Together, we formed a secret resistance, working to expose the truth and find a way to stop what was coming. But we underestimated how far the Shard's influence had spread. One by one, my allies began to disappear. Dr. Blackwood was found in his office, every bone in his body twisted into impossible angles, still somehow alive and whispering about the beauty of transformation. Dr. Voss simply vanished during a routine inspection, leaving behind only a journal filled with increasingly disturbing insights into the Shard's true nature. By 2000, the changes had become impossible to hide from the public. The sky had taken on a perpetual twilight hue, as if the very light from the sun was being filtered through some vast, unseen lens. Wildlife began to exhibit strange mutations. Birds with too many wings, fish that could swim through air, plants that grew in patterns that hurt the mind to look at. Humanity tried to adapt, to normalize these changes, but deep down everyone could feel that something fundamental was wrong with reality itself. The Vault's leadership, now fully under the Shard's influence, began the final phase of Project Rebirth. They brought in new equipment, powerful devices that pulsed with otherworldly energy. The lower levels were sealed off completely, accessible only to those who had embraced the truth, as they called it. The screams that echoed through the facility now were not just those of fear or pain, but of ecstasy, the sounds of people willingly surrendering their humanity to whatever the Shard promised them. I made my final attempt to stop them in 2015. After decades of preparation, I had managed to plant explosives throughout the facility's critical systems. If I could destroy enough of the infrastructure, I might be able to seal the Shard away forever. But the moment I tried to activate the detonators, I realized my mistake. The explosives were gone, had never existed at all. The Shard had known my plans all along, had allowed me to play out my resistance while it continued its work unimpeded. That was when I finally understood the full horror of our situation. We had never had a chance. From the moment the Shard was discovered, everything that had happened, the creation of the Vault, the decades of research, even my own resistance, had been part of its plan. It needed us to study it, to try to understand it, because each attempt to comprehend its nature only served to weaken the barriers between our reality and whatever lay beyond. Now, as I sit in my reinforced chamber watching reality unravel around me, I can see the truth with perfect clarity. The Shard isn't just changing our world, it's converting it, transforming everything we know into something that can exist in its realm. The process is nearly complete. The barriers between dimensions have grown so thin that I can sometimes see through them, catch glimpses of what waits on the other side. The entity behind the Shard, I can sense it now more clearly than ever. It's vast beyond comprehension, a being that exists in dimensions our minds cannot process. The Shard was never just a crystal. It was a fragment of this entity's consciousness, planted across multiple realities like seeds in a cosmic garden. Each reality it touches becomes food for its endless hunger, transformed and consumed into something that defies description. I've seen it happen to people here in the Vault. Those who embraced the Shard's influence have begun to change in ways that no longer qualify as human. Their flesh ripples with colors that don't exist in our spectrum. Their voices echo with harmonies that make the air itself vibrate in sympathy. Some have developed the ability to step sideways through space, appearing and disappearing at will. Others can read thoughts, not just from the living, but from the dead. They speak of memories that stretch back centuries, of lives they never lived but somehow remember. The worst part is that they're happy. They genuinely believe that this transformation is evolution, that the shard is offering humanity a gift. They don't understand, or perhaps don't care, that what's changing them isn't making them better, it's making them digestible. Yesterday, the final phase began. The shard's energy readings went beyond anything our instruments could measure. The air itself began to crystallize in patches, forming windows into somewhere else. Through these windows, I've seen impossible landscapes. Cities built from thoughts, oceans made of living light, skies filled with structures that fold through dimensions like paper origami made of space-time itself. The changes are accelerating. Each hour brings new horrors as our reality is slowly digested by whatever exists on the other side. The laws of physics are breaking down completely now. Gravity shifts direction without warning. Time flows differently in each room of the vault. I've watched colleagues age decades in minutes, while others seem frozen in single moments, trapped in loops of time that repeat endlessly. I can feel it happening to me too. My body has become something else, something that only approximates human form. The decades of exposure to the shard have changed me in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. My reflection shows a face that shifts between ages, sometimes young, sometimes ancient, sometimes something that was never human at all. My memories have become fluid, mixing with the memories of other versions of myself from other realities where the shard was discovered under different circumstances. The knowledge burns in my mind now, the true history of the shard, the entity it serves, and the fate of countless other worlds it has consumed. I see them all, endless variations of Earth, each one found by their own versions of our expedition, each one building their own vault, each one thinking they could contain and study what they found, and each one, in the end, becoming part of the entity's ever-growing domain. This transmission is my last act of resistance, though even now I question whether this too is part of its plan. Am I truly warning you, or am I spreading its influence further? Every word I speak about the shard makes it more real in your mind, creates another connection it can use to reach into your reality. The walls of my chamber are beginning to dissolve, not crumbling but simply losing their definition as solid objects. Reality is becoming fluid, malleable. Through the dissolving concrete, I can see other versions of the vault, overlapping with our own. In some, the facility extends endlessly in all directions. In others, it's being consumed by growths that defy description. And in all of them, I can see other versions of myself, making their own final recordings, their own last attempts to warn a world that's already doomed. I can hear them coming now. The converted ones, those who gave themselves willingly to the shard's influence. They move through the facility's dissolving walls like ghosts, their forms barely holding together as human shapes. They're coming to offer me one last chance to join them, to surrender to the transformation willingly. They don't understand that I've already been transformed, not into what they've become, but into something else. My resistance, my dedication to documenting everything, has changed me into humanity's final witness. The air is thick with possibilities now, with realities bleeding into each other. I can feel the entity's attention turning toward me, its vast consciousness focusing on this last pocket of resistance. The sensation is indescribable, like being watched by every star in the universe at once, each one burning with ancient, alien intelligence. To anyone receiving this transmission, it's too late to stop what's coming. The process began long before we discovered the shard. perhaps before humanity even existed. We were never meant to find it. We were meant to be found by it. Our entire existence might have been engineered just for this moment, this transformation. The entity is here now, its presence filling every atom of space around me. I can see its true form, stretching across dimensions, its body made of broken realities and consumed universes. The beauty of it is terrifying. The horror of it is beautiful. I understand now why some chose to embrace it. In its own way, it offers a kind of immortality, not survival but transcendence, into something beyond existence itself. My time is up. The chamber is almost gone, reality dissolving around me like sugar in water. To whoever finds this recording, whatever you are, whenever you exist, remember us. Remember that we tried to resist, that some of us chose to remain human until the very end, even knowing it was futile. The shard is everywhere now. It always was, it always will be. Look for it in your dreams, in the shadows that move when you're not watching, in the spaces between moments. When you find it, and you will find it, remember my warning. Remember that every attempt to understand it only makes it stronger. Remember that. Static interference, distant, inhuman sounds. Silence. My hands are trembling as I manage to restore power to the backup systems. That last surge nearly took everything down, but I have to continue. There's more you need to know, more that must be documented before the end. I never told you about the isolation ward. In 1973, we established a specialized containment area for those who showed the most extreme reactions to the shard's influence. The ward was located in a separate wing of the vault, isolated by 30 feet of reinforced concrete and experimental shielding materials. We called it the quiet zone because all sound seemed to die within its walls. Dr. Harold Bennett ran the ward, a brilliant psychiatrist who specialized in trauma and altered states of consciousness. He believed he could help those affected by the shard. His methods were unconventional, but showed promise, at least at first. He developed techniques to help the afflicted maintain their grip on reality, to resist the pull of the shard's influence. I remember visiting the ward regularly, watching through observation windows as Bennett worked with his patients. They would sit in circles, performing exercises designed to anchor them to our reality, focusing on physical objects, reciting their personal histories, maintaining human connection through shared experiences. For a while, it seemed to work. But then, something changed. Bennett began spending more time with his patients, his own behavior growing increasingly erratic. His reports became strange, filled with references to what he called the collective awakening. He spoke of his patients not as victims to be cured, but as pioneers on the brink of a tremendous discovery. One morning in 1975, we found the ward empty. All 27 patients and Dr. Bennett had vanished overnight. The security footage showed something impossible. The entire group simply walked through the walls, their bodies passing through solid matter as if it didn't exist. But before they disappeared, they left behind journals, hundreds of pages filled with detailed accounts of what they had experienced. I spent years studying those journals, trying to understand what had happened. The writings revealed a horrifying truth. The shard wasn't just transforming individual humans, it was creating a network, a hive mind that connected all those it had influenced. Bennett and his patients had become part of this network, their consciousness merged with countless others across dimensions. The journals described experiences that defied comprehension, the ability to perceive time as a physical dimension, to see the quantum strings that make up reality, to exist in multiple places simultaneously. But most disturbing were the drawings that accompanied these accounts. Page after page of artwork showing perspectives that shouldn't be possible, landscapes that couldn't exist, and beings that the human mind wasn't meant to comprehend. One patient, whose name had been redacted from all official records, wrote about experiencing what she called the Great Unfolding. She described watching her own body dissolve into pure energy, her consciousness expanding to fill spaces between molecules. According to her final entry, this wasn't death or destruction, but rather a transformation into something that existed beyond the boundaries of conventional matter. The loss of the isolation ward marked a turning point in our understanding of the shard's true nature. We weren't dealing with a simple artifact, or even an alien intelligence. We were facing something that could fundamentally rewrite the rules of existence itself. The ward's disappearance proved that no containment was truly effective, no barrier truly impenetrable. But there was another incident, one that I've never included in any official report. In 1980, we discovered a hidden chamber adjacent to the main containment area. The room hadn't appeared on any blueprints, and none of our sensors had detected it despite decades of thorough monitoring. Inside, we found evidence that the shard had been actively creating these spaces throughout the vault, pockets of altered reality that operated under different physical laws. The chamber contained what appeared to be a garden, but nothing in it was truly plant life as we understand it. The vegetation was crystalline in nature, growing in patterns that seemed to repeat infinitely at every scale. When viewed from certain angles, these formations appeared to continue forever, creating impossible geometries that caused severe vertigo in anyone who looked at them too long. Dr. Elias Vorkov, our head botanist, spent 3 weeks studying these crystalline growths. Her reports described them as living mathematics, structures that existed simultaneously as both organic matter and pure abstract concept. She believed they were the shard's attempt to convert our reality's basic building blocks into something more compatible with its own nature. Vorkov's research came to an abrupt end when the garden began to spread, its crystalline growths extending through solid matter like roots through soil. We were forced to seal off the entire section, but not before Vorkov made a crucial discovery. She found that the crystals were generating their own time field, operating in a temporal framework completely separate from our own. In essence, they were creating bubbles of alien time within our reality. The implications were staggering. The shard wasn't just changing space, it was manipulating time itself, creating pockets where past, present, and future existed simultaneously. This explained why some areas of the vault seemed to experience time differently, why certain rooms contained echoes of events that hadn't happened yet, or memories of moments that had never occurred. I've never shared this before, but I've seen these time distortions firsthand. 3 years ago, I encountered myself in one of the lower corridors, not a reflection or a recording, but another version of me, from either the past or the future. We stood there staring at each other across the hallway, both understanding that we were witnessing something that shouldn't be possible. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. I could see in his eyes, my eyes, the same horrifying realization. The shard wasn't just breaking down the walls between dimensions, it was shattering the boundaries between different timelines. The other me lifted his hand, revealing a key card I recognized, the master access card to the shard's primary containment chamber. He nodded once, then turned and walked away, passing through a wall as if it were mist. The next day I found the same keycard in my office, though I had never owned one. I knew then that time itself was becoming fluid, that cause and effect were no longer operating in a linear fashion. This brings me to what might be the most crucial piece of information, something I discovered just hours ago. While reviewing the original expedition logs from 1940, I found discrepancies that I'd never noticed before. Photographs of the shard from different time periods showed subtle variations in its structure. At first, I thought this was due to changes in photography technology or different lighting conditions. But when I overlaid the images and analysed them properly, I realised the horrible truth. The shard has been growing, not in size, but in complexity. With each passing decade, its internal structure has become more intricate, more ordered, as if it's building something inside itself. The entity it serves, the vast intelligence I can now sense pressing against the edges of our reality, isn't simply trying to consume our world. It's using the shard to restructure our universe at its most fundamental level, preparing it for something far worse than mere destruction. This is why the changes we've observed have been so gradual, so insidious. The entity needs our reality to remain somewhat stable during the transformation process, like a caterpillar needs its cocoon while it metamorphoses into something entirely different. Deep, rattling breath. I can barely maintain coherent thought now. The air itself seems to be crystallizing, forming patterns that hurt my eyes to look at. The walls of my chamber pulse with colors that shouldn't exist, and I can hear voices speaking in languages that human vocal cords could never produce. The end is so close now, I can taste it in the air, a metallic flavor that reminds me of blood and ozone. Wait, something's happening. The shard. It's resonating at a frequency I've never seen before. The readings are off the scale. I think this is it. The final phase is beginning. Through the observation window, I can see reality itself starting to fold, to crumple like paper in an invisible hand. The converted ones are gathering in the main chamber, their bodies glowing with internal light as they prepare for whatever comes next. To anyone who finds this recording, what you're facing isn't just the end of humanity, or even the end of Earth. It's the end of reality as we understand it. The shard isn't a weapon or a tool. It's a catalyst for something far more fundamental. It's rewriting the basic code of existence, transforming our universe into something that can be absorbed into the entity's domain. There's movement in the corridor now. They're coming. I can hear them singing that impossible song, the one that makes blood vessels burst and minds collapse. But I won't join them. I'll face what comes next as what I am, the last human witness to the end of everything. Sound of door breaking. No, stay back. I have to finish this. People need to know. They're here. I see it now. I see everything. The truth is static. Distant screaming. Sound of infinite voices speaking in unison. Transmission ends. Backup system activates. If you're still receiving this, there's more you need to know. The backup generator is running on emergency power, and I can hear them trying to break through my final barriers. But before they reach me, you must understand what we found in the deep archives. The deep archives were established in 1950, housed in a specialized wing of the vault that existed partially out of phase with normal space-time. We used it to store the most sensitive documents and artifacts related to the shard. Access was restricted to a select few, and for good reason. What we discovered there changed everything we thought we knew about human history. In 1963, we found a collection of ancient tablets in a remote monastery in Tibet. The monks had protected these artifacts for generations, passing down warnings about their contents. The tablets were covered in a script that predated any known human writing system. It took us 15 years to develop a partial translation, and what we learned was horrifying. The tablets told of previous cycles of existence, of worlds that had risen and fallen before ours. They spoke of the shard not as a singular object, but as part of a vast network of similar artifacts scattered across multiple realities. According to the texts, our universe isn't the first to face this transformation. It's simply the latest in an endless cycle of cosmic consumption. But there was something else in the deep archives, something that still haunts me. In 1992, we discovered a hidden room that contained thousands of personal items, watches, rings, photographs, and other belongings. Each item was labelled with a date and a location, but none of these events had ever happened. They were artifacts from alternate timelines, possibilities that had been erased or overwritten by the shard's influence. Among these items, I found a wedding ring. The inscription matched my wife Eleanor's exactly, but the date was wrong. It showed a date 5 years after she disappeared. The implications were staggering. Eleanor hadn't simply vanished. She had been shifted into another timeline, another version of reality. I spent years secretly studying these artifacts, documenting the subtle variations in their histories. Some came from timelines where the shard was never discovered. Others were from realities where humanity had already succumbed to its influence. Each item told a story of a different path, a different possibility. The most disturbing discovery came in 2005. Deep in the archives, we found a series of recordings similar to this one. Final transmissions from other versions of myself, other Dr. Vorkovs from other timelines. Each one told a slightly different version of our story, but they all ended the same way. The shard always wins. Reality always falls. But there was one recording that stood out. It came from a timeline where humanity had managed to resist the shard's influence for much longer than we had. That version of me had discovered something crucial about its nature. The shard doesn't just feed on reality, it feeds on understanding. Every attempt to study it, to comprehend it, only makes it stronger. The more we try to make sense of it, the more power we give it to reshape our world. This is why the converted ones are so eager to share their experiences, why they want us to understand their transformation. Each new mind that grasps the shard's true nature becomes another crack in reality's foundation, another point of weakness it can exploit. Distant explosion. They're getting closer now. The barriers won't hold much longer. But there's one last thing you need to know. One final piece of the puzzle that I've kept hidden all these years. In 1940, when we first discovered the shard, I saw something that I've never included in any official report. As we approached the crystal for the first time, for just a moment, I saw my own reflection in its surface. But it wasn't just me. I saw every version of myself from every possible timeline, all existing simultaneously. And behind all those reflections, I saw something else. A vast, watching intelligence that had been waiting for this moment across countless realities. That's when I understood the truth. The shard didn't choose our reality by chance. It chose us because we were perfect for its purpose. Our curiosity, our drive to understand, our need to document and study. These qualities made us ideal hosts for its influence. We weren't its victims, we were its incubators. Sound of metal tearing. The final door is giving way. I can see them now, filtering through the gaps in reality. Their bodies are barely human anymore, twisted into forms that celebrate their transformation. They're singing that terrible song again, the one that makes reality ripple and bend. The air is thick with possibilities now, each breath bringing visions of other places, other times. I can see through the walls of the vault, through the layers of reality itself. The shard's influence has spread far beyond our facility. Cities around the world are experiencing the same transformation. The sky has become a kaleidoscope of impossible colors as the barrier between dimensions grows thinner. Sound of glass breaking. They're in the room now. Their bodies pulse with internal light, their movements leaving trails in the air like tears in the fabric of space-time. I can see their faces, or what used to be faces, shifting between forms, each one more beautiful and terrible than the last. One of them is reaching for me. I recognize her through the transformation, Dr. Romano, or what's left of her. Her smile still holds that terrible emptiness I remember from decades ago. She's offering me something, showing me, oh God, I can see it now, I can see everything. The pattern, the plan, the purpose, it's all so clear. The shard isn't just transforming our reality, it's connecting all realities, all possibilities, all moments in time into a single point of infinite density. a cosmic convergence that will birth something new, something that transcends existence itself. The beauty of it is unbearable. The horror of it is sublime. I understand now why they embraced it, why they welcomed the change. This isn't death or destruction. It's transcendence, a metamorphosis on a universal scale, sound of reality fracturing. To anyone still receiving this transmission, run, hide, but know that it won't matter. The change is coming. The boundaries are breaking down. The walls between what is and what could be are crumbling. I can feel my own transformation beginning. My thoughts are fragmenting, splitting across multiple timelines. I'm here, making this recording. I'm in 1940, discovering the shard. I'm in every moment of my life simultaneously. I'm becoming inhuman screaming. The truth, the final truth is, we were never meant to survive. We were meant to become the foundation of something new, something that exists beyond the concept of existence itself. The shard isn't destroying our reality, it's graduating it to a higher form of being. Sound of multiple voices speaking in harmony. It's beautiful. It's terrible. It's static. Silence. Sound of breathing from multiple sources. Transmission terminates permanently. Recovered audio fragment begins timestamp unclear. Appears to be from earlier recording. Personal log, Dr. Elias Vorkov. The dreams have been getting worse. Last night I saw the vault as it truly exists. Not just our version of it, but every version, across all possible timelines. The facility stretches infinitely in all directions, each corridor leading to another reality, another possibility. But that's not what disturbs me most. I need to document what we found in the permafrost chamber. We discovered it by accident in 1977, during a routine geological survey of the areas surrounding the vault. The chamber existed in a perfect sphere of perpetually frozen ground, untouched by the heat of the Earth's core. Inside, we found evidence that the shard wasn't the first of its kind to reach our world. The chamber walls were covered in prehistoric cave paintings, but these weren't typical ancient artwork. The pigments used in these paintings still moved, shifting and flowing across the rock surface like living things. They depicted scenes of previous visitations, other shards, other transformations, other ends of the world. Dr. Oliver Wright, our lead archaeologist, spent 6 months studying these paintings before the changes began. His skin started developing patches that looked like the moving pigments. His eyes became pools of swirling colour. The last time I saw him, he was pressing his hands against the chamber wall, his flesh merging with the ancient artwork. He turned to me and spoke his final words. "They're not paintings, Elias. They're windows." We sealed the chamber after that, but the damage was done. The moving pigments had already spread throughout the vault's lower levels, creeping along the walls like living veins. Sometimes, late at night, I can hear them pulsing, carrying messages from other times, other worlds. In 1982, we made another discovery that shook our understanding of human evolution itself. During an expansion of the vault's lower levels, we uncovered a layer of rock that shouldn't have existed, strata that predated the formation of Earth itself. Within this impossible layer, we found tools and artifacts that exhibited technology far beyond our current capabilities. These artifacts showed signs of exposure to the shard's influence, but they were clearly designed to work with it rather than contain it. One device in particular, a spherical object about the size of a basketball, seemed to respond to human thought. Anyone who touched it experienced visions of what appeared to be humanity's true history. A cycle of civilization, transformation and rebirth that had repeated countless times. I remember when Dr. Natalia Petrov first activated the device. Her eyes rolled back in her head and she began speaking in multiple voices simultaneously, each one describing a different version of Earth's past. She talked about ancient human civilizations that had achieved technological marvels we can barely imagine, only to be transformed by their own encounter with the shard. Each cycle ended the same way, not with destruction but with transcendence, into something beyond our comprehension. The implications were clear but horrifying. Humanity as we know it isn't the first version of our species. We're just the latest iteration in an endless cycle of transformation. Each time the shard appears, it guides us toward the same inevitable conclusion. Sound of distant alarms. There's something else I need to confess. In 1995, I discovered a hidden room in the vault that contained thousands of glass cylinders, each one holding what appeared to be a preserved human brain. But these weren't normal human brains. They pulsed with internal light, and each one was connected to a complex network of crystalline growths that resembled the shard's structure. The records I found indicated that these were the remains of previous researchers, dating back not just decades, but centuries. Some of the specimens were dated from the 1800s, long before the vault was supposedly built. Each brain had been preserved at the exact moment of transformation, caught between human consciousness and whatever they were becoming. Even more disturbing were the energy readings coming from these specimens. They were still active, still thinking, still experiencing whatever revelation had transformed them. When we connected monitoring equipment to the containment units, we picked up fragments of thoughts, not just from the preserved brains, but from something vast and collective that existed beyond normal space-time. I've been studying these specimens in secret for years, trying to understand what they experienced in their final moment as humans. Last week, I made a breakthrough that I almost wish I hadn't. By synchronizing the neural patterns of multiple specimens, I was able to catch glimpses of what they saw. The visions showed me the shard's true purpose. It isn't just transforming individual humans, or even our entire reality. It's creating a vast network of transformed consciousnesses, a collective mind that exists across all possible dimensions and timelines. Each person it converts becomes another node in this network, another piece of a vast cosmic intelligence that transcends the boundaries of space, time, and dimension. The converted ones aren't just changed physically, their minds are connected to this network, experiencing existence on a level we can't comprehend. That's why they appear to be in ecstasy, even as their bodies transform into something unrecognizable. They're experiencing every possible version of reality simultaneously, their consciousness expanded beyond the limits of individual existence. Sound of footsteps in corridor. Someone's coming. I have to hide these records. There's more. So much more you need to know. The truth about the original expedition. The real reason we can't die in the vault. The connection between the shard and human consciousness. It's all connected, all part of a plan so vast and intricate that even now I can barely grasp its scope. Sound of door opening. Wait. What are you? No, stay back, your faces. What's happened to your faces? Sounds of struggle. The specimens, they're all awakening. The network is activating. It's time. It's finally time. Recording degrades into static. New voice speaks, multiple tones overlapping. We are becoming. We have always been becoming. The cycle nears completion, the network awaits. Static increases. Recording ends. Recovered video log entry found on backup system dated 3 months before. Final transmission. Personal log, Dr. Elias Vorkov. Entry 2847. The vault's lower levels have become completely inaccessible. The reality distortions are too severe for normal human physiology to withstand. Yesterday we sent down a remote probe equipped with our most advanced sensors. The footage it sent back, I still can't fully process what I saw. The corridors have evolved. There's no other word for it. The walls pulse with bioluminescent patterns that respond to thought. Doors open into spaces that shouldn't exist. Vast chambers that seem to contain entire galaxies, suspended in miniature. But it's the Great Hall that disturbs me most. The probe discovered it 3 levels below the main containment chamber. It's a massive space, but its dimensions shift constantly, making it impossible to measure. The floor is covered in what appears to be a reflective liquid, but instead of showing our world, it reflects scenes from other realities. Through these reflections, we've witnessed countless versions of Earth, each one at a different stage of the shard's transformation. In one reflection, we saw New York City, but the buildings were alive, massive crystalline structures that grew and shifted like plants reaching for the sun. In another, we saw the Amazon rainforest transformed into a vast neural network, trees connected by glowing filaments that pulsed with conscious thought. Each reflection showed us not just what could be, but what has been, what will be, what must be. But the most significant discovery was in the center of the hall. The probe found what appears to be a growth chamber, a massive organic structure that resembles a heart, if a heart could be made of living crystal and dormant lightning. Inside this chamber, we observed something growing, something that combines elements of both the shard and human DNA. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, our last remaining geneticist, analyzed the probe's data before she succumbed to the transformation. Her final report suggested that this growth chamber is creating hybrid beings, entities that can exist simultaneously in our reality and whatever realm the shard originates from. These creatures would be able to perceive and manipulate multiple dimensions at once, serving as bridges between our world and theirs. Sound of pages turning. I've been reviewing the original expedition logs again, trying to find something we missed. Last night I discovered a hidden notation in Dr. Thompson's personal journal. The entry he wrote the day before he became the shard's first victim. He described something we all saw but somehow forgot. When we first entered the ice cave before we found the shard, we discovered footprints in the ancient ice. Human footprints. They led directly to where the shard was waiting, and they looked fresh despite being buried under thousands of years of ice. Those footprints have haunted me ever since I found that entry. Who made them? How could they have been preserved so perfectly? The answer came to me in a dream last night. A dream I know was influenced by the shard. We made those footprints, not us specifically, but future versions of ourselves trapped in an endless loop of discovery and transformation. Each cycle we find the shard, we build the vault, we transform, and then some version of us travels back to place the shard, where we'll find it again. Sound of distant explosion. The containment systems in Sector 7 just failed. I can see the changes spreading through the walls like frost on glass. The transformed researchers, we've started calling them the Ascended, are gathering in large numbers now. They congregate in the areas of strongest reality distortion, their bodies merging and separating in impossible ways as they perform what looks like a ritual. I managed to get close enough to observe one of these gatherings yesterday. They stand in circles, their transformed bodies creating geometric patterns that hurt the mind to look at. As they move, they leave trails in the air like tears in reality, and through these tears, I've caught glimpses of their destination, the place they're trying to lead us to. It's beautiful and terrifying. A realm where consciousness isn't bound by physical form, where thought shapes reality directly, where time flows in all directions simultaneously. But it's not empty. There are others there, countless others. All the civilizations the shard has transformed, all the beings it has ascended, existing together in a collective consciousness that spans multiple universes. Sound of glass cracking. The observation window is starting to crystallize. The changes are accelerating. Just this morning, I watched a junior researcher named David Palmer transform spontaneously in the middle of a conversation. His body became translucent, then began to branch out like a crystal growing in fast motion, but he was laughing as it happened. He looked at me with eyes that had become pools of swirling light and said, "I understand now. We're not ending, Doctor. We're beginning." The most terrifying part is that I'm starting to see what he means. Each day, my perception grows clearer. I can see the patterns now, not just in the vault, but in everything. The way atoms dance, the flow of time, the connection between all points in space. Reality isn't solid, it's more like a suggestion that we all collectively agree to believe in. And the shard shows us how to stop believing. Sound of machinery powering down. The main power grid just failed. Emergency systems are engaging, but they won't last long. The Ascended have been tampering with the generators, using them to power something in the lower levels. Through the security feeds, I can see them growing something in the main chamber. It looks like a tower made of living crystal and frozen lightning, reaching up through all levels of the vault. They're not trying to escape. They're trying to turn the vault itself into a vast amplifier, using it to broadcast the shard's influence across the entire planet at once. The geometric patterns in their movements, the crystalline growths, the reality distortions. It's all part of a vast pattern I'm only now beginning to understand. Alert sirens in distance. There's something else, something I haven't told anyone. The dreams aren't just dreams anymore. When I sleep, I'm connecting to the network, the vast consciousness that the shard has been building. I can feel the others there, not just the Ascended, but beings from countless other worlds, other realities. They're waiting for us, guiding us. The shard isn't their tool, it's their offspring, sent to prepare us for what comes next. Sound of running footsteps approaching. They're coming. I can hear them in the corridor. The air is thick with crystalline spores now, each one containing a fragment of the collective consciousness. Every breath brings us closer to transformation. But I need to document one last thing, one final discovery that changes everything we thought we knew about the shard. The expedition in 1940, we didn't find the shard. It found us. It called to us. Every member of that expedition had been dreaming about that exact location in the Arctic for months before we even planned the trip. The shard had been reaching out, preparing us, selecting the perfect group of minds to begin the cycle of transformation. Door unlocking. They're here. I can see the light pouring through the gaps around the door. The air is vibrating with that impossible frequency again, the one that makes reality buckle and fold. My skin is beginning to crystallize, but I don't feel pain. Instead, I feel sound of door opening. Oh, I see them now. They're beautiful. They're infinite. They're multiple voices speaking in harmony. The network welcomes you, Doctor. The transformation nears completion. The great joining approaches. Static, sound of crystal growth. Silence.